Debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we're talking about two very important stories. The first, with reference to the National Security Advisor, Mr. Moeed Yusuf's two-day visit to Kabul, in which a number of issues came under discussion, including humanitarian aid and Pakistan's proposal of strengthening the economic engagement with Afghanistan to help tackle its financial challenges, and of course, among other things, reviving trade ties, moving towards barter trade, trading in local currency, and then of course also reviving major connectivity projects and working forward on them. What other issues of course were discussed as part of this visit by Mr. Moeed Yusuf, and what sort of an impact this is going to have on Pakistan-Afghanistan relations and the step forward in terms of the evolving situation in the neighboring country, we'll explore in further detail in the show. We'll also be taking a look at the situation in India, where in a recent report by New York Times, we found out that India has acquired the Pegasus spyware along with another missile system from Israel, and this is part of a deal made back in 2017. Whether or not this is something that has actually happened, since the Indian government has denied it, we're going to try and explore that in further detail as well, and understand whether or not the Modi regime is in fact guilty of treason, as the Congress party accuses them of, with of course them earlier denying any such agreement taking place, and no such spyware technology being used against its own citizens. As you can see, I've been joined by Raja Faisal and Farrukh Pitafi in the show. And for our first segment with regards to Moeed Yusuf's visit to Kabul, we've also been joined by Pakistan's ambassador to Afghanistan, Mr. Mansoor Ahmed Khan. Thank you very much, Mr. Mansoor Ahmed Khan, for taking the time out and joining us at the debate. We're truly honored to have you on board. I'd like to start off with the fact that when we understand that this is an important visit by the National Security Advisor, the first to Kabul since the Taliban regime have taken control, what sort of major important issues came under discussion with the acting Deputy Prime Minister and the acting Foreign Minister, and of course the Pakistani delegation? If you could kindly highlight the major issues that were discussed.
Well, thank you very much. As you know that change that took place last August, on August 15, 2021 in Afghanistan, as a result of that change, Afghanistan's foreign exchange reserves were frozen by United States. Afghanistan's banking system has gone into serious problems. Flow of funds into Afghanistan has practically stopped from outside world. And due to these measures imposed by the world on Afghanistan, the humanitarian situation has continued to deteriorate. And in recent months, a harsh winter and then a continuing drought has brought a big humanitarian and economic disaster in Afghanistan. And therefore, the purpose of this visit of National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf to Afghanistan was to discuss with the Afghan leadership their needs in humanitarian field, and how to strengthen economic engagement between Afghanistan and Pakistan, how to facilitate trade and economic cooperation between the two countries that can bring some relief to the Afghan people. And that is why this visit was important, and National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf had very constructive and positive meetings with Afghanistan's interim Deputy Prime Minister, acting Foreign Minister, Ministers of Trade, Commerce, Ministers of Public Health, Minister of Mining, Minister of Agriculture, Ministers of Information Technology and Education. And therefore, it was a comprehensive visit. As a result of this visit, we have identified the areas where we have already an engagement, but we want to deepen that engagement. We want to provide more humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, extend more assistance to Afghanistan in the areas they need, want to stimulate trade and economic cooperation between the two countries, so that the hardship and suffering of Afghan people is addressed to the maximum possible extent, and normalization of their economy starts taking roots.
Yes, Mr. Mansoor, as part of what Pakistan, of course, has proposed in terms of its economic and trade engagements with Afghanistan, is a sort of barter trade or trade in its local currency as well. Have these been operationalized and outlined as to how exactly this is going to be carried out and what all it's going to entail? Was there any discussion on that?
Yeah, since the banking structure in Afghanistan is kind of dysfunctional since 15th August, and no legitimate transactions can be made from outside Afghanistan into the banks in in Afghanistan. Therefore, most of the trade that is taking place is through indirect routes. One of the routes is the barter trade. Some barter trade is already taking place because Pakistan is the major source of Afghanistan's imports, fruits, dry fruits, carpets, gemstones. And then similarly, Pakistan is one of the major exporters to Afghanistan in terms of their basic needs, in terms of commodities, and so many other products. So barter is one of the feasible ways of addressing this current challenge of banking system. Although the banking system is also gradually now starting, United Nations is undertaking some humanitarian transactions, bringing money for humanitarian operations. United States has also allowed some exemptions for licenses for import of humanitarian goods in Afghanistan. But normalization of banking channel, it is believed that will take time because of the current political situation. Therefore, in the absence of any financial transaction systems through banking, barter trade and other methods will be more frequently used than the normal transactional system.
Ambassador Mansoor Ahmad Khan, we very well know, sir, that right now Afghanistan and of course Taliban regime is actually looking after its humanitarian crisis, and they might be very busy in that. But at the same time, we know that Pakistan is facing terrorism, continuous terrorism, which originates from Afghanistan, especially two of the provinces, Nangarhar and Kunar province. Can I ask, was there something discussed related to that as well? Because I think they need to hypen up their efforts to stop this menace of terrorism that actually comes to Pakistan and hits Pakistan very bad.
This visit was primarily focused on humanitarian engagement and increasing exchanges between the two countries in the field of economic cooperation, commercial exchanges, trade, transit, and connectivity. But as you know that economic engagement, peace and stability, all these areas are interrelated, and no normalization or economic transactions or humanitarian engagement is possible if the countries are threatened by terrorism. Therefore, peace and stability matters have been a matter of constant discussion between the two sides. Pakistan and Afghanistan have maintained institutional engagement on addressing the issues of security, cross-border issues, terrorism issues. As a result of that, I think there is a harmony of views on both sides that these issues terrorism is a threat to Afghanistan's own security. Afghanistan is facing a threat of Daesh, threat of other regional terrorist groups, and Pakistan and other neighbors are also threatened by various terrorist groups. Therefore, this has been a matter of discussion, not only during this visit, but in other visits also. But let me assure you and your viewers that Pakistan and Afghanistan have been very candidly discussing these issues in institutional channels, and have agreed that all these issues should be discussed and addressed through official channels.
Right, Ambassador Sahab, let us come back to the economic aspect, because that seems to be the reason that in this meeting or this visit. Let me ask you about this exchange mechanism. Since you were talking about it, let me ask you, will there be some kind of mechanism to decide how valuation is to be done? That is one aspect, one question. The second aspect is regarding the currency, crisis in Afghanistan. You were talking about the near collapse of the banking channels in Afghanistan. Is there a quasi mechanism that Pakistan can lend some kind of stability to their financial system without actually getting sanctioned in return?
Pakistan is Afghanistan's closest neighbor. We have more than 2,600-kilometer border. Most of Afghanistan's exports and imports take place through Pakistan, or a significant portion of Afghanistan's exports and imports takes place through Pakistan. Therefore, Pakistan has been from the very beginning when this change took place. Pakistan has been focusing on, number one, humanitarian engagement, and number two, on finding the ways to give a boost to Pakistan-Afghanistan bilateral trade, our transit, and moving through regional transit mechanism, because this kind of trading and economic activity provides Afghanistan with some sources of revenue through customs and through other areas, and this is mutually beneficial. Pakistan also benefits from this kind of cooperation. So in the coming months, the efforts of the two countries will remain on enhancing their economic interaction, finding mechanisms such as having trade in their own local currencies, and having some trade through barter, like we are also having with Iran, and then also working with the international community towards normalization of banking channels. Though it will take some time, but gradually Afghan government is bringing more and more revenues and is earning more through its exports to other countries, including Pakistan.
Right, Ambassador Sahab, I was talking about this mechanism because usually whenever you are bartering something, somebody has to decide what is the worth of one product vis-a-vis the other one. So I was talking about some common or joint mechanism to regulate and decide, because later on these issues can be some reason for dispute, sir.
We have actually agreed on this time. During this visit, we had extensive consultations and discussions with Afghanistan side, not only with Afghan interim government's ministers, but also senior officials, banking officials, and all other relevant officials. And we have decided on a number of measures, including these mechanisms which you are talking about, and development of these mechanisms, or putting them into place on ground, will take some time. We have established committees, and we have already started after this visit a follow-up, and there you will see that there will be more and more engagement between these relevant ministries of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we will definitely find ways of using these mechanisms in a way that they do not come into the ambit of international sanctions or the current political implications arising from non-recognition of the current Afghan regime, but at the same time serve for raising revenues for the Afghan interim government and for improving service delivery for the people.
Right. Mr. Mansoor, with regards to, of course, the projects and the economic relations, we also understand that perhaps multinational or multi-billion projects have been stalled since the collapse of the banking system in Afghanistan. With regards to major connectivity projects involving Pakistan and Afghanistan, and those that have been in the works but have been stalled, how are we going to go forward with that? If there was any discussion on that, please let us know on that point as well. And if there was, then what sort of ways do we see moving forward in terms of taking that ahead, since the banking system at the moment has collapsed?
We have seen that a number of mega projects connecting Afghanistan with the region, both in north and south, have not been able to go forward because of the lack of peace and stability in the past 2 decades. But with this change which has taken place in Afghanistan, we hope that Afghanistan will move towards lasting peace and stability through inclusive governance, through respect of human rights and all other international requirements, and this provides an opportunity for moving forward on projects like mega projects like TAPI. The two sides discussed this project and are willing to move forward. Actually, Turkmenistan's team was here or is here during this week, and the project is moving forward. Similarly, the countries are ready to expedite progress on CASA 1000. There are also trilateral railway connectivity project between Uzbekistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. That is another future mega project that will boost regional connectivity in big way. And there are electricity transmission projects like TAP, which can connect Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan through electricity transmission lines. So I think all these projects, and then there are other railway projects connecting Quetta with Kandahar and Peshawar with Jalalabad. So all these projects have been discussed. Taking them forward in a meaningful manner will naturally take time. But Pakistan's focus now remains on geoeconomics, meaning that we have to develop, focus on our connectivity, economic connectivity with Afghanistan through to Central Asia and beyond to Eurasia.
Absolutely. Ambassador Sahab, since you are repeatedly we are talking about taking time, let me ask you about the timelines here, because regarding TAPI, we have been hearing about it for quite some time. And of course, there are projects which are going to take time, but there might be some low-hanging fruits as well. You have talked about railway link and others. Do you think that any of these projects are such that they can materialize within months or perhaps within a couple of years, sir?
You are absolutely right that the mega projects will take time, and as I said earlier, that mega projects like TAPI, CASA 1000 have not been able to move forward in a significant way because of the lack of peace and stability. And now we are hoping that an environment is being created, so we will be able to take them forward in the coming years. But there are many low-hanging fruits. Low-hanging fruits are in terms of boosting Pakistan-Afghanistan trade. Pakistan-Afghanistan trade has been there around 1.5 to 2 billion dollar mark, which is much below the actual potential. If Pakistan and Afghanistan improve their trading routes, their trading connections, their trading channels, then this economic interaction, trade interaction, and transit interaction between Pakistan and Afghanistan can easily cross 5 to 10 billion dollars per year. We have also decided, both sides have agreed and decided to improve our border crossing points like Torkham and Chaman, bring them to the international standards. We have decided to start a luxury bus service between Peshawar and Jalalabad, which will be followed by Quetta and Kandahar. So and there are so many other areas in which we have tried to bring improvement in trade and transit framework between the two countries, which I think in the coming months and years is the low-hanging fruit which you are talking about.
Ambassador Saab, I just wanted to know, when we talk about the bilateral trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan, there is something very important, and that is of border fencing right now. And don't you think that there will be problems created by the smugglers or those who want to facilitate the smugglers? I just wanted to know, was there any concerns raised about border fencing as well, sir?
Border fencing was a response, or was built to deal with the challenges of cross-border terrorism, smuggling and trafficking issues, drug trafficking, and all these illicit movement issues. The rationale of fencing can only be realized if at the same time we provide facilitative way of crossing to the people as well as goods. That is why the two sides have agreed that while the border is very closely monitored for its movements, border crossing points should provide facilitative movement of people and trucks for trade. We have decided to bring a significant improvement in the border crossing point at Torkham, the main border crossing point at Torkham and Chaman, and also modernize and facilitate trade and pedestrian movements through other crossing points. There are a number of other crossing points like Ghulam Khan, Angur Adda, Kharlachi, Badini, and many others. So, the answer to or long term solution to these problems of fencing or border issues is that we should have very facilitated points of crossing. People living on both sides of the border are the same people culturally and socially, and they have deep economic interdependence on each other. Therefore, facilitative way of interaction between them or interaction between the two countries has to remain the focus, while at the same time we also need to guard against the challenges of terrorism and drug smuggling.
Right. Connectivity and connection between the two countries, Ambassador Saab, is very important. We even have easement rights on both sides of the international border. But let me come back to the question of connectivity and infrastructure. You are in Kabul right now. The Prime Minister of Pakistan is soon to go to Beijing. Let me ask you, is there any speculation in, or discussion in Kabul about joining a CPEC or any similar BRI projects where infrastructure can be developed within Afghanistan? Because we know while the international coalition was there, they did not deliver on infrastructure development the way it was expected to be.
Yeah, you are right. It is unfortunate, extremely unfortunate that while Afghanistan's North, Central Asian countries have a developed infrastructure, Afghanistan's South, Pakistan and India have a reasonably developed infrastructure in the subcontinent. But Afghanistan has not a developed infrastructure, or its infrastructure is in quite primitive form. And unfortunately, during the past 2 decades, when international community was there, US and NATO spent billions or trillions of dollars here. We don't see any worthwhile development in the infrastructure. Pakistan through CPEC has developed some modern infrastructure in recent years, and discussions continue between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and Pakistan, Afghanistan, and